It's a little bit crude, but nothing is perfect except maybe perfect competition, and that's what we're gonna do in 15 minutes or less. So watch out. So perfect competition, it's a type of market structure. What are market structures? Well, it's they work as yardsticks. So they tell us the size of the market, the number of firms, the number of buyers, the number of sellers, um, and it tells us to what degree products are differentiated, and the freedom of entry and exit in those markets, or how easy it is to enter exit those markets. So today we are gonna look at perfect competition. So this is theoretical, because one of the assumptions is that there's perfect information. So the buyer and the seller know everything, and that's impossible. However, again, it's a yardstick, so it's something that if businesses gravitate and they meet some of the criteria, then they'll likely be closer to perfect competition than they are to the opposite. So what is the opposite? We have the two sides of the force. We have monopoly, one seller, they dictate the price, and they can restrict the output to increase the price, like what they did with the OPEC, this group of sellers of crude oil. They joined forces, formed an oligopoly, and gained monopolistic power, and they were able to increase those prices by restricting the output. The same thing that just a couple of months ago, Saudi Arabia was trying to agree with Russia to restrict the output to increase the price of crude oil. Now, I think it was in April or on May 2020. However, Russia did not agree, and then hence they weren't able to do so, and price of oil went down. Anyway, just an example. So on the other end of the spectrum, what we're going to look at today is perfectly competitive markets. And that, what we're assuming here is that there are many sellers. And if you want to be a seller, you can. Anybody can enter the market or exit the market. So the assumption is that there's no barriers to entry. But then again, because there's no barriers to entry, there'll be so many sellers. Every seller is just like a grain of sand along the beach. So many of them. So none of them can actually affect the market. None of them can sort of restrict output because there's so many others selling it. They're price takers. So any seller goes into the market and will just sell their products at the price that is going in the market. So the second assumption, other than many buyers and sellers, is that they sell a homogeneous product. So a product that is exactly the same as everybody else's. And it's very difficult to find that type of market. And I wouldn't like to buy things from that type of market. We all like different things: clothes, tastes, fashion. So if products are homogeneous, life will be very boring. But hey, that's one of the assumptions. Another assumption is perfect information and freedom of entry and exit. So because there's freedom of entry and exit, we're assuming that there will be very, very low fixed costs, because fixed costs usually are a barrier to entry and exit in the markets. If you want to start a business online, then the costs will be quite low and the market might be more competitive. If you want to start as a personal trainer, the costs might be quite low and the market might be competitive. On the other hand, if you want to start a business that requires a manufacturing plant, you might have to invest, and there are fixed costs and technology to it, and those become barriers to entry. So when we're looking at a perfectly competitive market, then there's no barriers to entry. Anybody can just set up a business if they want to. Yes. So things to bear in mind are, again, we look at our variables, so price and quantity, and normally the assumption is that the demand curve is downward sloping. However, when we're looking at, this is when you look at the market, but when you look at the firm in the market, that's not their demand curve. And the reason that is not their demand curve is because they are one among millions, or I don't know, billions. We're looking at a perfectly competitive market, so you're one seller among many sellers. So hence, you don't affect the market at all. entering or exiting the market doesn't really affect, you don't affect that much the market, neither by restricting the output or selling more. There we go. So you're one more little shop among the thousands, millions. So the demand curve tends to be very elastic. Elastic demand curves are when products are there's many substitutes to them, and the demand for the product is price driven. So for the firm, the demand curve will be flat like this, very elastic. Second is the revenue, the marginal revenue will be constant. So the demand curve will be equal to the marginal revenue. The revenue is the amount of money made from every extra sale. So every single time you make an extra sale, you make the same amount of revenue, because you can sell as much as you want, because you are so small and insignificant, so to speak, that you're one out of thousands of sellers. So that the demand is infinite for your product as long as you are selling it at the market price. Again, you are a grain of sand among the beach. So every single time you sell an extra product, you earn the same marginal revenue, which I guess is kind of good, right? But the problem here is that because it's a highly competitive market and it's price driven, then businesses are going to sell at the lowest cost of production. So if you look at a business and their average cost curve, they're going to sell at the lowest possible cost of production. Any higher than that, and guess what? Nobody's going to buy from them, because there are many other sellers selling at a lower price. So you cannot sell at a higher price. So if you're going to enter the market, you're going to have to sell at your lowest cost of production. At least that's the assumption in the long run. You cannot sell at a higher cost. Again, if you do, you're not going to sell. And then the lowest cost of production will be the lowest point of your average cost curve. And your average cost curve, as you might have heard in the past, is the cost per unit, taking into account the variable cost per unit and the fixed cost per unit. You add both and you get this curve. And it goes down and then up for different reasons, such as the use of your capital, and so how the machines you have, if you have the right amount of people for those machines. If you have too many, then your average cost is going to increase, because people are not going to be productive because they have no capital to work with. So, but ideally in a competitive market, you'll have exactly the amount of people you need to be able to be competitive and reduce those costs, so that you can sell in that market. So you're pretty much you're selling at the cost of production. Are you making any profits? If you are talking to a business studies student, then probably not. But if you're talking to an economist, then they'll say yes. Because if you are breaking even, then you are making what is called normal profit. So you'll be making normal profits. I guess technically you are paying wages. So if you are in that business and you're a manager, then it's good for you. But you're not making any profits, or sorry, any abnormal profits. You're not making any more than breaking even. Good. So that's what happens in the long run. We need to also understand that there'll be other businesses there. So there might be another business that can make more products. So there we go, another business there, average cost 2. So their quantity supply in the market is Q2 in comparison to your business, which is Q1. And because, again, they're one among many other businesses, the demand for those products is technically, the assumption is infinite. So if anybody can reach that low cost of production, then they'll be selling in that market. And another business might be able to make more products and sell them, as long as it's at the lowest cost of production, at the lowest point of their average cost curve. Now, one way to find your lowest point of the average cost curve is when the marginal cost equals the average cost curve. So we have our average costs, and the lowest point is the point where the marginal cost equals the average cost. The marginal cost is the cost of making that extra product. So the point you make that the cost of making that extra product tends to increase as you employ more people for your business. The average cost of making the product might increase, eventually hitting the average cost. Now, if it goes beyond it, then it'll drive your average cost up. But if it's below the average cost, then it'll drive the average cost down. So the point where they meet, that will be your lowest average cost of production. So that's how you find your average cost of production, that point at which businesses will be selling in a perfectly competitive market. So that happens in the long run. But in the short run, businesses can make abnormal profits. So let's look at an example. So in the short run, this is your price y-axis, the quantity, the x-axis. This is the going market price, and hence this is also the marginal revenue, the revenue you gain for every unit you sell at that price. But some clever man has been able to, come up with a better way, and his average cost curve, you can see there, is below the market price. And that's his lowest point, right? That's the point where the marginal cost equals the average cost. So that's the lowest cost at which he can produce. Now, in that type of market, this business, number one, will try to profit maximize. And to profit maximize, we look where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So this point here. So they'll make products at this point. That'll be our profit maximizing point. So they'll make products, and the cost, if you can see the average cost curve, it hits the point there. So we make a line across. So that will be the cost of making that'll be the cost of making every unit when they make that quantity. And hence all that, the difference between the cost and the price will be their profit, and that will be abnormal profit. And that's great. Abnormal profits, who doesn't want abnormal profits? But in a very competitive market, that attracts other businesses to go into the market. And as other businesses go into the market, then if we look at the market itself, have our price, our quantity, we have our supply, our demand. This will be the market. And what happens is you have this equilibrium there, quantity and price. Now, if there is profit or there's abnormal profit, then there'll be an increase in suppliers. So our supply curve will shift to the right, increasing the quantity, but also decreasing the price. And this is because these high profits have attracted businesses to come into the market. And then as businesses go into the market, there's been an increase in supply, as you can see the quantity there, and then that's driven down the price. Now this is happening in the market. Now from a business point of view, what he sees is that price, the market price, has gone down. So this will shift down here. So we'll see P1 will drop down here. And as the markets, as the businesses enter into this market, then the excess of supply will bring the price down. And also because if we assume that it's a perfectly competitive market, then there's perfect information. So other businesses will also find out how this business was able to reduce those costs, and they'll do the same. So suddenly the price, because everybody will copy it, will do the same, and they'll lower their costs. And by lowering their costs, then they'll lower they lower the price so much because they're competing, because A is selling that for, or the market is selling that for £1, but this smart guy was able to make it for 50p, so he was making a profit. Now the whole market has realized that it's possible to make it for 50p, so that's what they're going to do. And hence, because everybody is then making it at 50p and also selling it at 50p because it's a competitive market, then the price of the market drops, and drops to the point where our long run demand curve is, which is this flat horizontal line at the lowest point of the average cost of production, because all profits have been eroded. If by any means this goes beyond that, well, nobody's going to want to sell products in that market because they're already selling them at the lowest possible cost. So sellers will go away of that market, out of that market, and then that will bring the price back up, so that it's at the lowest point of the cost of production of these different businesses. Yeah, and that is a perfectly competitive market. Homogeneous products, in the long run selling at the cost of production, and no product differentiation. All the products are exactly the same, and only in the short run we can see that businesses can profit maximize or incur losses, but in the long run they will all just break even. They will all just sell at the cost of production. Again, try the questions below on the description to test your knowledge, and I'll see you another time.